Hello, everybody. Nurse Scott here. How are you? Welcome to another episode of my special podcast series, The Emergency Mind, The Psychology of Emergency Department Patients, Families, and Staff. This is based on a book I started to write some 20 years ago. I've come and gone. I obviously didn't finish it because it's not, published, but or even in print, like self-published. But there's enough information there for me to share with you in podcast format, and actually doing these podcasts, I've actually gone back and finished some of these chapters, so that's good. It may be out in print after all. Who knows? We're not there yet. In any case, this blends what I know from 25 plus years of emergency nursing and my bachelor's degree in psychology, because patients people in the emergency department are very interesting psychologically, and I wanted to learn a little bit more about them. And I don't have all the answers, but I have some insights, and that's what this is all about. Before we start, if you like this video, please click like down below. Leave a comment for me, let me know what you think, and subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you'll be notified when new videos are available. For those of you listening as an audio podcast, please subscribe to the podcast and come on over to YouTube and check out my channel, Nurse Scott. And I think you will enjoy watching these podcasts as much as listening to them. Often I have some visual aids here over my shoulder, some graphics, not always. And then there's also all the other videos that I've made that I think, you may find a lot that you will find, you'll find videos that you learn from and that you enjoy. So today, what's our topic for today? Oh, I know. This is a good one. I can tell you from experience that working in an emergency department, people are like, oh, so what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a nurse. Oh, what department or your specialty? I'm like, ER. Like, oh, their eyes get big. Oh, you must see some shit. Like, I have, yeah. That's the reason you work in the emergency department, because it's interesting. It's fast-paced, and every day is different. But a lot of people, and a lot of nurses say, I could never do that. I want something that's more routine. And a lot of people say, I could never work as a nurse, especially in the emergency department. I can't stand the sight of blood and, people dying. And anyway, what makes emergency nurses, and nurses in general, but emergency nurses in particular, what makes them suited for this type of work that really most people can't do? So we have some insights in today's chapter. I hope you learned something and you understand us weird ER people a little bit better after this. So let's get into it. This is chapter 18. How do they do it? The personalities of ED staff. The roles of emergency department staff are challenging and demanding, requiring them to handle situations that are not only complex and stressful situations, but also those many people consider disgusting, tragic, or creepy. As an emergency nurse, I've often been asked questions like, how can you watch someone suffer? How can you watch someone die? How can you touch body parts that have been cut off? How can you stick a baby with a needle? How can you clean up vomit? How can you touch dead bodies? So why would anyone become an emergency nurse, physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant? Well, people do what they do for very good reasons is a basic pillar of psychology. In fact, it's the basis for the explanations of behavior given in this entire book. People work in emergency departments because, in some way, it gives them back something they value. Often, this is the personal satisfaction of knowing that they've helped other people in a time of real need, continuing opportunities to learn in an ever-changing field, a decent, not astounding paycheck, professional status, and some great stories to tell. Even for those of us who are well suited for this type of work, the stress can take its toll. Let's look at some insights into what makes us ER folks tick. Insights from research. In 1987, a study by Atkins and Piazza aimed to shed light on the personalities of emergency nurses and their ability to work effectively in emergency departments. They believed that the personalities of ED staff play a crucial role in determining their suitability for the job, as they must be able to handle the stress and pressure of a fast-paced and dynamic work environment. The study used various personality assessments to analyze the traits of emergency nurses, and the results showed that they possess a high level of responsibility and stress tolerance. The high sense of responsibility suggests that emergency nurses take their role seriously and are dedicated to providing the best possible care for their patients. They're also able to handle the stress of their job and remain calm in the face of difficult and challenging situations. The high level of stress tolerance shown in the study is crucial for working in emergency departments where patients, often more than the staff can manage, require immediate attention and care. Emergency nurses must be able to stay composed and focused even in such high-stress situations to provide the best possible care for their patients. They must also be able to work quickly and effectively, making split-second decisions that can have life or death consequences. My theory: the Yerkes-Dodson curve gets shifted. I have my own theory about how emergency nurses are able to do what they do when most people could not. It seems to me that ED nurses and other ED staff might have a shift in their Yerkes-Dodson curve. This could be due to their innate personalities, or it could be learned or acquired through experience. I can't say. But there's something about this special breed of clinicians. The Yerkes-Dodson curve is a well-established theory in psychology and provides insight into the relationship between arousal, sensory stimulation or stress, and performance. According to this theory, performance improves as arousal increases to a certain point, but beyond that point, it decreases as arousal becomes too high. This creates an inverted U-shaped curve, with performance reaching its peak at some optimal level of arousal. For those of you that are listening to an audio podcast, let me explain the diagram that I have up. This is the Yerkes-Dodson curve. On the x-axis, the back and forth axis, is arousal. And the up and down axis, the y-axis, is performance. And we see a curve that looks kind of like a bell curve or an upside down U. And what this means is at low levels of arousal, as arousal goes up, performance goes up. We think maybe sometimes being nervous is a bad thing, but a little bit of nerves is good. And then it gets to a peak, and then after that, as arousal continues to increase, performance now starts to decrease. And this shows a central kind of bell curve shape in a solid line, and then in a dashed line, we see that same curve kind of pulled over to the right. And this is to indicate that the peak of the curve is actually at the level of a higher level of arousal for emergency department staff. At least that's the theory I'm trying to explain. So if a person is not aroused enough, they perform poorly. Think of someone who's bored or disinterested, phoning it in when they're working on a task. Then consider someone who is moderately aroused, meaning they're enthusiastic about doing something, or maybe even a little nervous. This optimal level of arousal helps them focus and do their best on the task at hand. They're at the top of the curve. Finally, think about a person who is so nervous or overwhelmed that they can't do their best on a task, or maybe they even just freeze and don't perform at all. Test anxiety among students and performance anxiety, often experienced by actors, dancers, and musicians, are examples of this. This person is all the way to the right on the curve, and over-arousal has sabotaged their ability to perform well. My theory is that for some reason, ED nurses and other staff have their Yerkes-Dodson curve shifted to the right as shown by the dotted line. Their optimal level of arousal is higher than most people's. Maybe they naturally work better under pressure, or maybe they've learned to do so after some period of time. Maybe their desire to work in the ED has motivated them to keep working under increased pressure until that pressure becomes normal for them. The same with doing things that are unpleasant or uncomfortable. They do it until they become accustomed, that is, desensitized to them, and they feel less unpleasant and uncomfortable. If this is true, then it would follow that this sort of nurse would actually perform poorly in a less hectic environment. Hiring nurses who work in positions that fit their personality, including their stress and tolerance, seems to be important for providing good care. The good news is, of course, that there is a wide variety of nursing specialties where a nurse can find their perfect match. Are ED staff special? Emergency department workers are often exposed to unique and challenging situations that most people find distressing. Despite this exposure, They don't necessarily consider themselves to be special. Instead, they view their role as one of compassion, care, and support for patients who are in need. The exposure to these situations often leads ED workers to reflect on their personal beliefs and values. Some may find solace in religion or philosophy, which provides a framework for understanding the world and their place in it. Others may find comfort in the acceptance of the circle of life, an understanding that birth, death, and all the experiences in between are natural and part of a larger cycle of existence. For many ED workers, a sense of calling to care for patients is a key factor in handling the challenges of their job. It's a desire to make a difference in people's lives, to provide comfort and support, and to offer hope in times of need. This sense of calling helps ED workers to rise above the difficulties of the job and to focus on the importance of their work. Common coping mechanisms. To cope with the emotional stress of their work, emergency department staff may develop coping mechanisms such as depersonalization and intellectualization. Depersonalization involves disconnecting emotionally from the patient, which can help to reduce the impact of distressing situations. This can be beneficial as it allows staff to maintain a level of detachment from the situation and prevents them from becoming overly emotional or overwhelmed. However, depersonalization can also hinder the development of a therapeutic relationship with the patient, and the ED nurse or provider may appear distant or uninvolved. Intellectualization involves focusing on the technical aspects of care rather than the emotional impact of the situation. This can help ED workers to maintain a level of objectivity and professionalism, which is important in a fast-paced and high-pressure environment. However, it can also prevent ED workers from fully understanding and empathizing with the patient's experience, which is crucial in building a therapeutic relationship. I can report that I, personally, use these coping strategies. I've always valued working in emergency departments because it exposes me to so much of the, quote, real world, including the bad stuff, death, abuse, addiction, disability, pain, despair, but also the good stuff, courage, compassion, kindness, love, and perseverance. If a person, a healthcare professional, needs to avoid some of life's unpleasantness for their own mental health, it's fine that they do so. But for me, I don't want to spend this one life I have sheltered from any aspect of it, even the unpleasant aspects. Maybe I'm able to expose myself to all the bad because I've taken on the role of helper. I get to see what the real world is, but I also get to help make it better. And that's always my answer to the how can you questions. How can I stand to see people suffer? I don't. My job is to try to alleviate suffering. How can you watch people die? I don't just watch. I usually try to keep them alive. For those whose time has come, I try to comfort them and their families. When I'm involved in something tragic like doing CPR on a 2-year-old, I'm not thinking, oh, this is so tragic. The parents must be devastated. Why does this have to happen to an innocent child? No, I'm thinking, do we have a line? What's the heart rhythm? How long has he been down? Do we need to give epinephrine or defibrillate? Is the endotracheal tube in the right place? Is he easy to ventilate, or do we need to re-intubate him? And on and on. In short, I'm thinking about what we need to do, not how the parents must feel. I'm focused on the job, not reflecting on the tragedy of it all. It's not that I and other nurses like me are uncaring or unaware of how sad the situation is. It's just that in the moment, our focus isn't on that. Often we do feel the feelings after the situation is over. We aren't made of stone, you know. We like to call it controlled chaos. A large urban emergency department is often saturated with patients on gurneys, both in rooms and in the hallways. The air rings with phone calls. Regular staff, visiting physicians, and specialists scurry about. Patients come and go from tests. There may be a code, a full cardiac arrest, or major trauma case which requires a huddle of staff around a patient. Add to this the steady stream of ambulances bringing yet more patients, visitors wanting to know what's taking so long, and the occasional minor disaster like a leak in the roof or a fire alarm that just won't shut off. in spite of it all, things do get done. People do get help, and a patient being forgotten about and falling through the cracks is exceedingly rare. Working in such a setting is a challenging experience that requires a unique set of skills and personality traits. The fast-paced and dynamic environment, combined with the high stakes of patient care, can create a level of emotional stress that isn't found in other medical settings. Despite the challenges, many healthcare professionals choose to work in emergency departments because of the personal satisfaction and sense of purpose they derive from helping people in a time of need. So who would ever want to work in a place like this? Not everyone, that's for sure. The chaos and intensity of ED environment can be overwhelming for some individuals, but for others, it's the thrill of the challenge that keeps them coming back. The constant stream of patients, phone calls, and medical emergencies require ED staff to stay focused, alert, and on their toes. ED workers who are drawn to this type of work environment may be labeled as adrenaline junkies by some, but they're actually highly skilled professionals who enjoy the challenges and opportunities of their work. However, even for those who are well suited to working in the ED, the stress can take its toll. To deal with the emotional demands of their work, ED workers may develop coping mechanisms such as those just discussed. While these strategies can be effective in managing stress, they can also become barriers to a therapeutic relationship with patients. Therefore, it's important for ED staff to find a healthy balance between their professional and personal lives and to seek support from colleagues, friends, and family, and even mental health professionals when needed. I'm really happy that I can share insights into, I'm really happy that I can share insights with you about why we do what we do. And every emergency department, nurse practitioner, physician, PA, each one probably has a bit of a different explanation for why they do what they do and how they cope with the stress. And to be honest, some days are not all that stressful. Yes, it can be, but some days are kind of routine. The patients kind of trickle in. It's manageable. You're taking care of not, gunshot wounds and cardiac arrests, but you're taking care of abdominal pain and a urinary tract infection and a kid who broke their finger falling out of a tree, or things that are not all that stressful. So I just want to make that clear that it's not always crazy, although each emergency department is different. Some are crazier than others. Depends really on the area that emergency department serves. If you're in a rural area, you're going to have illnesses, maybe farm equipment accidents, or injuries from interactions with animals, pesticide poisonings, things like that. If you're in a suburban area, it's going to be maybe older folks with acute on chronic worsening of a chronic condition like asthma or a heart condition. It's going to be household injuries, slips and falls, kids who get injured on the playground. And if you're in an urban setting, you may have some of that, but you might also have homeless folks and all the health problems that are made worse by being homeless. You may have gunshot wounds and stabbings and violence related to gang activity and crime in a large city. So it just depends. And that also means that if you want to work in emergency, but you really don't like what we call knife and gun club, the violence, the trauma, then maybe you want to work more in a more suburban setting where you're going to see less of that, if at all. Or maybe the rural environment is for you. Maybe a little bit of a drive to get from where you live to where you work. But even within emergency nursing, there is a variety of practice settings, if you will. So I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed this exploration of the mind of an emergency nurse. And leave a comment down below. Let me know what you've learned. If you like the video, click like. Please subscribe to the channel. If you're listening as an audio podcast, please subscribe to the podcast and come on over to YouTube and discover what we have there. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I will see you next time.